SpeekyGeeky's TMNT Character Spotlight. Hi, everybody. Welcome to SpeekyGeeky. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Geeky. Today, we are going to be discussing and giving a big ol' spotlight to NECA Archie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures toy line. Over the years, we've tried to bring you episode after episode of all different lengths and realms of Turtles. Sometimes those episodes were Mirage, sometimes Fred Wolf, sometimes 2012, but historically, and you know we love diving deep into all the history here, those would focus on around 6 or so rad characters within each offering. Over the years, however, we've had a myriad of folks take time out of their busy days to ask us if we might be able to keep all the deep diving fun, but break it down a bit, because there's a big difference between finding 15 minutes at a time to learn about one exciting character versus over an hour to hear about 6 or more. We understand incredibly well that an hour or more is sometimes a long commitment and doable in this breakneck speed world we occupy. So we figured, heck, we think there's a way to meet folks where they're at. However they'd like to view our deep dives, by creating both a long-form episode and a series of shorter, broken-down character-specific episodes, so that way we're putting the turtle power of choice in the viewer's hands on how they would like to interact on all our dorky character content goodness. Plus, this way, if you like a specific character and want others to know how freaking bodacious they are, boom! You can share a quick story with them versus throwing a full-on shelf of encyclopedia books their way. That said, we'd love for fans to weigh in on who you would like to see covered in our TMNT deep dives too. So be sure to let us know in the chat and in the comments below, because who knows? Some of your choices may end up making an appearance or two in one of our upcoming episodes as well. So welcome to our new-ish Spotlight series, where every episode we choose a different character from the various worlds of Turtles, and eventually other shows as well, to deconstruct their origins for your viewing entertainment. A reminder here too that each of these episodes can be found in their fuller form within other episodes within our channel as well, which we'll always be sure to conveniently drop links for within the video and the description. So if that is your preferred way of hearing more, by golly, we got you covered there too. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy hearing more about a specific character within the world of Turtles than you could ever want to know. Null was one of those quintessential 80s villains, like Inspector Gadget's Dr. Claw or Die Hard's Hans Gruber, where even before we saw their face for the first time, which for Null happened to be in issue 15's The Howling of Distant Shadows, we implicitly understood this was one bad dude, even before we saw his overt devil horns as a visual giveaway. Again, in the 80s, the comic book powers that be seemed to be under the impression that unless us kids were hit over the head with a bag of hammers toward a character's villainy, we couldn't suss out which characters to be cheering for and which to be rooting against. But even still, we gotta give props where props are due, because dang, those horns really complemented his whole overall aesthetic. At this point, we're going to throw up a big old 35-year-old spoiler alert, because it's safe to say you can't really dig into this character without touching on some major events within the Turtles Archie universe. Even though there were some notable other villains in the Archie iteration, and this character would go away and then reappear within the fuller scope of the full-run narrative, if we look at the series collectively, Null was essentially the Archie version's big bad, and was responsible for not just the death of Man Ray's little buddy, the beloved Bubba the Glublub, courtesy of his proxy, Kid Terra, the Earth being scouted for alien invasion, courtesy of Maligna's envoys, coordinating with Null through the aliens Skull and Bean, but also essentially the death of the entire team of the Mutanimals, courtesy there of his proxies, the Gang of Four. And yes, you would probably be correct if you were to assume we'll be diving into all of these rad characters just mentioned in an upcoming Deep Dive or 10 as well. Whoa, back up a second, Geeky. Did you say Null was the big bad here and not Krang or Shredder? That's a pretty bold statement, maybe even fighting words for some die-hard Archie fans. But let's unpack this character's story and let us be the judge, huh? Well, it's true, both Krang and Shredder do play a sizable role in this series as well. After the first arc, which was essentially a retelling of the first couple of episodes of the cartoon, we see the comic divert toward a very different direction than the animated series. This includes the introduction of wholly new allies and villains that are never seen in the cartoon, but are pivotal to this expanded story, and which largely sees the Turtles taking their adventures outside their comfort zone of New York and into brave new locales around the world and the outer reaches of the galaxy. The way they accomplished moving away from classic cartoon villains was to promptly imprison Shredder and give Bebop and Rocksteady their heart's desire to roam freely in the savannah. In issue 13, titled The Final Conflict, it is also worth noting that Null was introduced into the series the very next issue. So it was a bit of the Rick and Morty approach to storytelling before it was fashionable, where it starts the story with the premise of, what if the Turtles got everything they wanted? Where would they go from there? And despite initial skepticism to having the more identifiable villains sidelined, the answer was remarkably that it seemed to work really well. One of these newly introduced characters was Null, a brutish, cigar-chomping, cutthroat businessman who dabbled in the destruction of the environment and was seemingly a less than pressing threat to the Turtles, that we'd later come to realize that this dude was low-key way worse than we could have ever imagined. If Rat King was behind the IDW's version of Armageddon games, it looks like Null would have been pulling the strings in this series. Don't believe us? Remember that environment-destroying scheme we noted just a moment ago? Well, it turns out this was all in service of a much larger plot to destroy the Earth, and to make it more inhabitable for an alien armada led by another new baddie named Wingnut, as well as a group of demons called the Four Horsemen that, yep, sure seem very much to be the very same Four Horsemen tied to the biblical apocalypse, which makes even more sense when we realize that Null isn't just your average despotic businessman, but rather a horn-housing, leathery-winged demon. And here's the kicker, even though he succeeded in murdering an entire team of the Turtles' closest allies, and we saw others he aligned himself like Maligna meet their ultimate fate because the Archie series never got a proper closure, this dude was never technically defeated. So to summarize, Shredder was imprisoned, though to be fair, later escapes for a bit, Maligna and her empire are destroyed, but Null, who seemingly orchestrated much of the death and chaos that permeated this whole series, ends up walking away scot-free. So, say it with us here, Null is the TMNT Adventures big bad. We mean, are we wrong? We'd be remiss if we didn't point out one enormous glaring caveat here, and it's almost a decade-old spoiler, but still, you know, be warned, which is that even though technically Null never had a comeuppance within the Archie series proper, in a story that is technically not canon but intended to bring closure from the original writers years after the series was abruptly cut short, Null did eventually get his just desserts in the story TMNT Odyssey, where we saw him team up with Juliette Savanti, Romero's wife. You can hear our deep dive on Savanti Romero right here, to try and take over the multiverse, and was torn asunder by the ghosts of the mutanimals. This may be a good moment to note that even though Odyssey was a crowdsourced graphic novel that was created as a fan project after Viacom's TMNT acquisition and isn't officially considered canon, it is still an incredible read, involves original Turtles writers and artists, and gives a well thought out and loving closure to a lot of lingering plot lines that the Archie series was never given the ability to complete. It also, much like Turtles Forever, acts as a bridge between the various incarnations of Turtles, and has a wealth of moments that will have longtime fans of the series geeking out in their seats. The fate of Cuddly and Cherubae is just one example. So, if you haven't read this incredible love letter yet, it is worth attempting to scout a copy wherever you can. We should add a disclaimer that even though Odyssey taps directly into Archie, this read is very much not an all-ages friendly book. So a friendly heads up for any folks who are thinking of reading this as a bedtime story for your little ones. But wait, if you thought that was where it ended with this character, his cachet of tricks up his sleeve is about to get way more boss fight level. Not only can he sprout wings seemingly out of nowhere, but he can also shapeshift, taking on the form of the mutanimal Mondo Gecko at one point, use mind control, the use of which here did not age well, and further helped to solidify him as somehow even more of a villain. And we'll just leave it at that. He had earthbound and extraterrestrial flight, and likely also the ability to breathe within the confines of space. The ability to create fire, both creating a wall of flame and shooting fire from his fingertips at different points in the series. And to top it off, the dude seemed to have Super Shredder level type strength. At one point, he effortlessly takes on both the Turtles and the mutanimals single-handedly. So for those in the back, we'll repeat this here. This is your big bad. Okay, with that long-winded point proven, that literally nobody asked us to prove, or was in any way fighting us on. Now seemingly out of the way, let's dig into how we imagine this figure coming to us as a mighty devilish addition to our shelves. In a perfect scenario, we would see Null having the ability to be displayed as either his businessman appearance or his full-on demon mode appearance. To achieve this, we might again be looking at something akin to what we saw with Professor Perry, with both versions in an ultimate-sized 2-pack. One version in a business suit, one beefed out with gargoyle-sized wings. Accessories might not be able to include his iconic stogie unless it was sold as an exclusive on the NECA store perhaps. But we could see this coming with his N emblazoned swivel chair, a wall of fire, some fire bursts that could be attached to his fingertips, some alternate heads with various sized horns, and some small, unarticulated, puppet-sized versions of the Four Horsemen, and perhaps a couple mini-sized mutanimals as well. SpeekyGeeky's TMNT polls. Since we're already talking about wholly new characters in plastic, we figured we would take a moment to ask you, the viewer, who you would like to see in one of our upcoming videos. We've been running polls on our YouTube community page as well as our SpeekyGeeky Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit pages as to which TMNT characters from various iterations we might want to see as toys. Here are some options from our latest polls, which you can weigh in on here in the comments or head on over to any of our socials for the full list of option names to weigh in over there as well. And stay tuned because these winning options and more may very well appear in an upcoming TMNT Deep Dive or 2, or 10. There are also some incredibly talented TMNT customizers who are already creating some of those characters who appear on our polls. And it is a beautiful thing to see. Here are just a few of those absolutely creative folks that you are definitely going to want to keep up with, so make sure to follow them on their socials as well. Don't forget, we mentioned this last episode and it's still not too late, but we'd love to feature your amazing turtle art in an upcoming episode. For submissions, head on over to our SpeekyGeeky official Instagram page or tag us in the post with the hashtag SpeekyGeeky TMNT fan art. Again, this is open to all ages, and we just ask that submissions keep in mind that it should be all ages appropriate content. Where else can you find Mr. Geeky in the coming months? Even though we are hard at work putting together a handful of geeky new deep dives and interviews together for you this very minute, never you mind how we know what time of day you are watching this buster, just trust us. If it's in an hour of a day that ends in day, we're probably working hard on it. SpeekyGeeky's very own Mr. Geeky, hey, that's me, is still managing to make the rounds all over the YouTubes to spread his dorkiness far and wide. And yep, that sure did sound way grosser than we intended, didn't it? First up, over on our all-ages friendly sister channel, Geeky Jr., for all those of you who appreciate the sound of a voice that can only be described as if nails on a chalkboard met Golem from Lord of the Rings, you're in luck, because Mr. Geeky tries his best on all sorts of nostalgic classic stories with narrations and voices for all your little geeklings and adults who are young at heart. We're talking characters from Sesame Street like Ernie, Bert, Grover, Big Bird, Cookie Monster, Wonder Pets, Daniel Tiger, Thomas the Train, Yo Gabba Gabba, Rubba Dubbers, and so much more. You can also find SpeekyGeeky lending his voice to some upcoming Mirage 2003, 2012, and Rise TMNT comic read-alongs on Teddy Gaming Review's bodacious channel here, as the voice of Professor Kaori on the fan-made audio adaptation of the hit fantasy series The Fourth Wing over on the astoundingly talented Maddie Moore's channel here, and finally, we'll be geeking out and dishing on all the current TMNT news on Turtle Talk, as well as helping some rad figures from their plastic confinement on Grippin' and Rippin' over on Dave Wonder's channel here.
Well, there you have it. That concludes part 4 of our TMNT Spotlight series.
But don't stray too far from the sewer lair,
because part 5 is right around the corner.
We have no doubt you have some characters that make the tippy top of your list as well that you are stoked about seeing. So make sure to make your hopes known and join the discussion in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to sub up, give the video a like, and share it with anyone you know who would appreciate these types of videos. Also, make sure to check out the description for some other links that lead to some expanded similar content we think you'll probably enjoy quite a bit. We realize you could have gone anywhere and you chose to nerd out with us, and we appreciate that. So, as always, I am Mr. Geeky, and until next week, TMNT Spotlight Speaky, keep it geeky, folks.